19th century Shakespeare criticism. Charles Lamb as a critic of William Shakespeare. Charles Lamb is one of the most important critics of the 19th century. As a critic of William Shakespeare, he is not prolific. Prolific means producing much. He read the tragedies of William Shakespeare and held them incompatible with stage representation. He said, "There is so much in them which comes not under the province of acting, with which eye and tone and gesture have nothing to do. The practice of stage representation reduces everything to the form of elocution. Talking is the direct object of the limitation. Talking is the direct object of imitation. Here, on the stage, we try to imitate the gesture and posture of a man. In the words of Lamb, it is not what the character is, but how he looks, not what he says, but how he speaks it. But speech is only a means to express the flux and reflux of emotion in the mind and heart of character. It cannot be a worthy index of the whole of emotion. That is why he fails to express the mind and heart of the Shakespearean characters on the stage. Everybody says that Shakespeare's plays are natural. Of course, they are natural, but they are grounded deep in nature, so deep that the depth of them lies out of the reach of most of us. Lamb does not mean to say that the plays of William Shakespeare made another thing by being acted. He cites the example of Hamlet. Lamb says that the 9 parts in 10 of what Hamlet does are transaction between himself and his moral sense. They are the silent meditations with which his bosom is bursting. His tongue scarcely dares to utter and express the deepest recesses and chambers. Lamb fails to understand the way in which they can be represented on the stage by an actor. An actor comes and mouths them out before audience. He makes a large number of people his confidants. But the Hamlet of Shakespeare fears to make even deaf and dead all his confidants. So the Hamlet of William Shakespeare is entirely a different being from the Hamlet on the stage. Besides, the soreness of mind is the distinguishing feature of the character of Hamlet. He behaves cruelly to Ophelia, whom he loves dearly. The actors on the stage make him show and curl off his nose at Ophelia's father. They make him express a scorn. All the Hamlets on the stage have ranted and raved at Ophelia as if she had committed some crime, but the audience never thinks why, after all, Hamlet expresses so much scorn to a lady whom he loves dearly. We do not know that it is not anger on the part of Hamlet, but grief which assumes the appearance of anger. Here, love counterfeits hate. Of course, Hamlet talks in the language of alienation. In the words of Lamb, it is not alienation, it is a distraction purely. So we find that the Hamlet of Shakespeare appears different on the stage as he is misrepresented on the stage by actors. But Lamb does not blame the actors for it. He says that the characters of Shakespeare are so much object of meditation that at the time of reading we think not so much of the crimes which they commit as the intellectual activity which prompts them to do these crimes. At the time of reading, the crimes are comparatively nothing to us. The inner mind of the characters in all its perverted greatness solely seems real. That is why when we find Macbeth preparing to commit murder on the stage, we long to prevent it by any means. The sight destroys the delight which the words in the book convey. At the time of reading, the deed seems to belong to history. The poetry and the images engage our mind at the time of reading, but at the time of witnessing Macbeth on the stage, the deed becomes more important to us. The same is the case with Lear. When we find Lear tottering about the stage, we want to take him into shelter and relieving him. But Lamb says that is all the feeling which acting of Lear ever produced in me. But at the time of reading King Lear, we enter into the mind of King Lear. We become Lear for some time. When we find Lear identifying his age with that of heaven themselves, we are overwhelmed. No gesture and posture can represent it on the stage. That is why Lamb exclaims, what has the voice or eye to do with such things? The play is beyond all art. In other words, Lamb holds that Lear is essentially impossible to be represented on the stage. This is because we imitate the corporal dimension of Lear on the stage, but the greatness of Lear lies in intellectual dimension of Lear and not in the corporal dimension on the stage. We see nothing but corporal infirmities, but at the time of reading, we enter into the mind of the Lear. In the words of Lamb, what we see upon a stage is body and bodily action. What we are conscious of at the time of reading is almost exclusively. That is why the play of Shakespeare gives a different delight at the time of reading from the delight which we get at the time of witnessing. For example, when we read the incantation of witches in Macbeth, we are spellbound as Macbeth was. The mind is surcharged with suspense and seriousness, but when we behold these them for serious thing, they become an object of laughter. The effect is contrary to the old saying that seeing is believing. The sight actually destroys the faith. The same thing happens with the tempest. When we read the tempest, we are delighted, but when we see Prospero and his spirits on the stage, we are overpowered by hateful, incredible. Really, spirits and fairies cannot be represented. These notes I have prepared while I was in BA Honors in 1979. That is why Lamb has concluded that the tragedy of Shakespeare cannot be represented on the stage. If at all they are represented, they produce a different impression on the spectators, which is not at all noticeable at the time of reading. As at the time of acting, trivial and outward things are given prominence. The nucleus of tragedy is either ignored or overlooked. The same thing may be true with the comedies of William Shakespeare, but Lamb has confined himself to the tragedies of Shakespeare. Lamb is a typical critic of the 19th century. Like other romantics, He delights in discovering those things in Shakespeare which had been ignored by the predecessors. He luxuriates in novelty. Unlike the 18th century critics, he has tried to explain how far he has understood Shakespeare's tragedies. He has not passed any judgment on the tragedies of Shakespeare. He has given vent to an impression at the time of reading and seeing the tragedies of William Shakespeare. Thank you.